Hello, BookTube. So I'm going to be doing a mid-year review of my reading, and so a lot of people on BookTube have been just uh, summing up the reading for the year so far. Now that we're halfway through, and I wanted to do the same, but I wanted to do a little bit different than the normal mid-year freakout tag, because I don't feel like talking about my fictional crush and whatever, things like that. So I thought the better way to do this is to go with the version that Christopher Russell did. So I'm going to be parasiting his tag, though he did say that anyone could do it, but he probably meant anyone but me. So, uh, which means I have to do it anyways, just to spite him. And I have all the prompts, all the books here that I want to show you, and we'll get into it. It's 5 questions, and they're very obvious questions, and they're perfect for a mid-year review of your bookish experience so far this year. And so, question number one is, what books have you changed your opinion about? And I just have one prompt for that, and that is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This was a reread for me. I read it a few years ago and struggled with it, but then I reread it this year, and I was hoping beyond hope that a reread of this book, because it was very difficult when I first read it, but I loved it and thought that on a reread it would become a favorite of mine, and that did not happen. And that's probably the book that the reason why it changed in my mind, or why I changed my opinion about it, because I thought that this book would have a lot more to it on a reread, because I was going into this knowing the style, knowing the register that she was going for, and I was very much hoping that once I was acclimated to that I would see a whole lot more underneath that would appeal to me. And I don't know if that was the case, or I know that wasn't the case. It seemed a lot more. Once saw underneath the layer of the language that she's playing with, it seemed a lot more straightforward than I hoped for. And not that straightforward is a bad thing, because she's very good at it. Like, this is a very good novel. It just wasn't a favorite for me, and it didn't hit me like the way I was hoping it would. And so that's why I even I have a ton of critical apparatus. Like, this edition has a ton of critical apparatus and stuff that I've not even dipped into, just hoping to uh, uh, study this work more and see why it is that this book didn't strike a chord for me. What am I missing? Because it does feel like that. It feels like I'm missing something, or maybe blasphemy upon blasphemy. Maybe this book is not as good as I first thought it was, and I think that intuition is wrong, and so I want to see what I'm missing. So that was the book that where an opinion changed. And then if we go to question number two, what are the biggest surprises of the year? I have a few of that. So I have one nonfiction, and then um, a bunch of others in a theme that I've been recently reading in. But the nonfiction was a book I read in January. This is The Lagoon by Armand Marie Leroy. This is How Aristotle Invented Science. And this was uh, a book studying Aristotle's works, non-philosophical works, and not even his books on logic. It's just his natural history or natural science books, and there's a ton of them, just a ton of them. It makes for a huge portion of what survives from Aristotle that we have today, and yet it's his more philosophical and works on logic, um, his more philosophical and logical works that get all the attention, and that's how people see him as just as a philosopher. But this book completely changed my perception of Aristotle, where he is a much more fascinating and more uh, well-rounded of a figure than I ever thought he could be. And in fact, it seemed like he was more of a scientist first and a philosopher second, because this author really knows what he's talking about, and he's but he's also an incredibly engaging writer and thinker on the page. And I loved every bit of this, even though I didn't fully understand it all because natural science and whatever is not usually the type of stuff I read. But this book totally encaptured, it enraptured me, and it was so insightful, just on every page. And I totally enjoyed this book, and I was not expecting to. I thought it was gonna be like, think of that subtitle, How Aristotle Invented Science. I mentioned when I finished this that could easily that could generate a very dumb and obvious book, because Aristotle is an object of veneration among philosophy bros and whatever, and philosophy scholars and whatnot. And um, just to cite the name Aristotle is to give authority to whatever argument that you're trying to give, uh, or at least it's seen that way. But this author is very intelligent and explores the subject very well, and I was quite impressed by that, and I very much enjoyed that book. And then I have more surprises, and that would be the Greek tragedians. Here I have the Oresteia by Aeschylus. I have the Three Theban Plays, which I just barely finished this week, and then I just have a Greek drama anthology. I have not started Euripides yet, but I did not know what to expect going into these. I thought maybe they would be uh, such foreign works that I wouldn't understand them or wouldn't be able to comprehend them, and maybe to an extent they are, and the mere fact of me reading them in translation masks that fact. But just what I've been reading in translation here has been blowing my mind and has been an utter delight. I did not expect these plays to be as engaging, to be as interesting, to be as um, entertaining as they are. Especially, I would say, for Aeschylus, the Oresteia trilogy was very good. And for Sophocles, not even just the three Theban plays, but his Philoctetus and his Electra were so good. Um, so I've been just enjoying these reading through the plays so well, and I hope Euripides is the same. Though I hear that he is very subversive and hits a distinctly different tonal register than these other uh, Greek playwrights. So we'll see how that goes. But just discovering these playwrights has been such a joy. And so then we move on to question number three. Or no, that's yeah, number three. What is your favorite reads for the year? Um, so I have two novels, contemporary novels, and then two works of nonfiction. The novels would be, well, the first novel is, I gotta say, it's probably the best book I've read so far this year, and that's just tentatively me saying that, because ever since I've read this book has just stayed in my mind and has just trenched itself in there, and I keep thinking about it, and it's probably fits as for question number two about your biggest surprises, because um, I did not expect this book to not to triumph to stick in my mind so, but it's How I Became a Famous Novelist by Steve Helley, and it's just a 180 page novel, which is a comedy novel about uh, a man, like a degenerate young man who is dumped by his girlfriend and is invited to her wedding, and he wants to go to her wedding as a famous novelist in order to spite her, to get back at her, and so then it's the story of him studying contemporary fiction and how contemporary fiction manipulates people's emotions and how to become a bestseller, um, in order to become a famous novelist, uh, and those parts are hilarious. Like especially the scene of him going through a contemporary retail bookstore and making a checklist for himself about all these things that you need to include in in a contemporary novel in order to become famous. It's hilarious. Uh, you'd be slapping your knees laughing. It was just the best. And then there's the scene of when he actually has to write his novel. He doesn't know how to do it. Doesn't know how to do it, so he goes to a writing workshop and, and encounters a coworker of his there. that that scene I just can't get out of my head. But the thing that stuck with me with this novel is just how this is not just a funny novel. It's more of a a book on what fiction actually is and what it does and why we read it. And the novelist, of course, or the main character is very much an unreliable narrator. You're filtering everything through his warped mindset, and uh, he becomes to a point where he thinks every single writer who ever existed was a grifter, because he is himself trying to be a grifter and make boatloads of money. And he encounters many different authors, including an epic scene where he's on a debate stage with another writer, and all these great moments that are not just funny but actually searching and seeking about what novel does and why it appeals to us. And of course, there's a twist at the end. Um, that sets the whole thing in a different light. But then there's also at the very end, which I've mentioned before, because it's not a spoiler. The very end is him describing a book that he actually enjoyed, and that he kind of finally sees, or a book that he actually enjoys and that he wishes he wrote himself because of how sincere it is and how moving it was. And it's such an appropriate ending. But um, one of the things that really sticks in my mind with this book is that where he mocks readers of novels for going to contemporary fiction for capital W wisdom. That's what they go for. They go for wisdom, and so he stuffs his novel full of cheap wisdom, capital W wisdom that'll appeal to, you know, single cat ladies. But it was really good. Um, just just a brilliant book, and it's had me thinking too, like, why do I go to fiction? What do I read novels for? Do I read them for capital W wisdom, and beautiful prose is just bad poetry? um, I don't know. This For such a short book, this packed such a punch, and it's been on my mind ever since. And this is one of the few books I've ever read where I actually wanted to reread the entire thing as soon as I finished it. I've heard people say that before, and I've always kind of rolled my eyes at that. Like, why would you want to reread the same book right after you finish reading it, when you haven't really changed, you haven't given it time to think about it and let it sit in your mind. But I was very much tempted, and I actually did read like the first few pages of this as soon as I finished reading it. But man, that was such a good book. Uh, but then the other novel was this one here, A Day and a Night and a Day. This is a very different register. This is not funny at all. It's in fact basically a nihilistic novel, but it's got little grains of resistance to that. Um, and it's the story of a mixed race man um, who is being tortured in an interrogation because of his involvement in like terrorist activities. And he is an American man, and there's reason why he was involved in terrorist activities. It turns out it was a plot. It was him trying to get revenge um, for uh, for a tragedy in his life. And the story is not just about the torture and the relationship with his interrogator, which is just fascinating. It's a young, athletic, good-looking man who's incredibly nihilistic, but who's also incredibly intelligent. And those kinds of characters I've encountered in novels before, and they always are some of the most fascinating characters if they're done well. I think of, say, 1984 and the character of O'Brien, or in Fahrenheit 451 and the character of Beatty, and or even Brave New World and the character of the World Chancellor. Uh, and the conversations that they have are just some of the most scintillating in all of literature that I love. And this uh, book includes tons of that, but it's also a reflection of memory and of time. And the memory, of course, is one of the big players here because it's also the story of his love affair in the 60s as a mixed race man with a white woman, a wealthy white woman, or a woman from a wealthy background. And that and just what that relationship meant to him, and it was how that relationship and how the relationship progressed and later on ended, that kind of set the course for his entire life. It's truly, and again, it's another short book. It's like 200 pages, uh, 230 some pages, and it's just so well done, so perfectly executed, and of course it's got beautiful prose in here, and I don't know if it's got any of that capital W wisdom that the other novel that I mentioned mocks, but um, I was underlining passages in here just left and right, and yet what surprises me is that this author is basically unknown, or at least unknown to me. He's not considered some grand literary figure or anything like that, and yet this novel kind of just passed by. It was never a bestseller or anything, and yet here this is an utterly fascinating, beautifully written novel. And then the two nonfiction books are both works of sociology on the exact same theme. We have Why Love Hurts by Eva Illouz. If you remember, I showed a ebook copy of this because that's what I first read it in. But then I went and bought the physical copy because I knew that I wanted a physical copy of this. And then we have Cheap Sex by Mark Regnerus, The Transformation of Men, Marriage, and Monogamy. They're both books of sociology, but they do very different things even though they're on a similar topic. Um, I'll do this one first. Why Love Hurts is very much an in-depth, like intellectual seeking about the concept of modern love and relationships. So it's not just about love in general, but just the whole idea of a love relationship in our modern age and how that has changed drastically from even say 100 and 150 years ago. So it's about tracking that evolution, and she also compares it to, or she deliberately attaches it to the rise of modernity. So the rise of modernity is very much in parallel with the change in our perspective of love and marriage and relationships. And it is very comprehensive, even for a relatively short book. And it's incredibly insightful, incredibly penetrating in its uh, in her insight, and it's very broad ranging. And I thought this book has been the book that has made me think the most on these, not just on the subject in itself, but just on the wide ranging of her analysis, where whether or not I agree with some of it or not. Um, it was a book that really got the gears turning in my mind, and that's why I bought the physical book, because I want to go through my ebook and move my annotations from there on into this book. And while I'm doing so, of course, kind of uh, rehash all those arguments and thoughts that I had while I was first reading this, because I think this book is well worth that kind of study. And then this book here, it takes a different approach. It's this one is more accessible because Eva Illouz is very much a academic, and she writes very much in the academic style, which is not for everyone. This book is, even though Mark Regnerus is an academic, this book is far more accessible. But it's also a book that takes an argument. Or an argumentative approach. So the title is the argument. It's the argument that sex is cheap, and why that is, and whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. And he backs his analysis up with a lot of research, but he also does a lot of his own thinking on the page too. So he's very much present in his own book. It's not very much. It's not like an academic, showing of details and whatnot. Though there is a lot of detail in this book, there's also a lot of authorial thinking about these details. And I thought that was really well done, very fascinating, and a book that I really, really enjoyed, and was definitely a favorite read of the year. We'll move on to question number 4. What are your biggest disappointments of the year? And I'm pleased to say, BookTube, that I only really have one, I think. One, do I have a prompt to show you? I don't think I do. Um, I'd have to search my e-reader for it because I read it as an ebook. But it's on moral fiction right here. I read it as a anthology. I didn't prepare this one for some reason, but here it is anyways. John Gardner's book on moral fiction. This is an anthology ebook that includes on moral fiction, on writers and writing, and on becoming a novelist. So 3 different volumes here. I read this volume here on moral fiction, which is another short book, but it's a book that was on my TBR for, or at least as on my TBR for quite a while. And I thought I was going to love this book. I thought it was going to be a very fascinating discussion on what moral fiction is and why it matters. And of course, that is what it is, but it didn't blow me away as much as I thought it, or as I hoped it would. But I also think um, it left me behind, and maybe that's why it was a disappointing read, is because um, I had a hard time following the argument and what he was really going for, and it seemed like he was writing on a different level than what I was expecting him to go on, and it also was a little bit confusing too, because he isn't really clear with his terms. Um, in instances uh, he is, but then it's very ambiguous at other times, and I had a trouble trying to find out what exactly he was meaning by moral fiction, especially since he's not a religious writer, from what I understand. So he's not like making this, knee-jerk conservative argument about why, books with, I don't know, marriage before or sex before marriage is immoral or something. It's not simplistic by any means, uh, and it's not easy to dismiss. In fact, I was usually willing to agree with him on the points that I did get, um, but I felt like I was not up to speed, and I felt like he could have done more to make his book um, more appealing to people, I guess, who are not on his level, because he really does go into some in-depth discussion that passed me by. And for such a short book, he could have made it a bit longer, if and more clearer, uh, and maybe have done more to address arguments or objections to his arguments. So I don't know. That's why that was a disappointing read. And then we go to a big section here. What books? Question number 5. What books are you looking forward to reading? I have a ton, BookTube. I have a ton here that I can show you. I'll go through the novels first. So I have first. This is the Chunkster that won out. That I made a video on. I made a video on what Chunkster book I should read for the month of July. Uh, After reading the comments and having people personally message me, um, this is the book that went out in the end. This is a mass market Chunkster. This is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark. This one is just over 1,000 pages in this edition here. So this will be the book that I read for the month of July. It's a fantasy historical fiction book about 2 magicians and their romp in Napoleonic era England. So I don't really know much more about it than that, other than that it's a big book and that I do want to read this next month. And then we have 2 other novels. No, we have 4 novels, but these are 2 novels on a theme by the same author. I've been reading a lot of ancient Greek writings, and so I want to accompany that with some historical fiction from that period. So then we have Mary Renault. This is The Prey Singer. This is her book about the kind of like a heroic, I can't say it. One of those singers, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. They were sung out. They were performed, and they were performed by itinerant singers. And that's what this novel is a focus of. It takes one of those singers and has them travel around Greece and perform, and that's the perspective that this historical novel takes. And That's one that I've been wanting to read throughout this whole year. And then we have another book by Mary Renault. This is the Last of the Wine. This is her book giving a historical look at Athens during the Peloponnesian War. Um, and I've been reading a lot about Athens, and I like to see how this novel or this novelist depicts that period. So very much looking forward to those. And then we have two more novels. Um, I guess I'll do this one first. This is Thomas Wolfe. This is his Look Homeward, Angels. I've been wanting to read this for years already, and it's always been one of those books that is on the periphery of my TBR, but then gets booted off for the next newest, shiniest thing, and then it just sits there neglected on my shelf. And I think I'm gonna love this book. I do actually have the sequel to this, which is does it say what the title is? I think it's like of the river, something like that, of home and of no, of time and of the river, something. It's also in a modern classic like this, but it's like 1,000 pages, and it's got my edition doesn't have the blue; it's got the white. Um, but I really do want to read this. I think he's going to be an author that I really like, and I heard that he's a great prose stylist too. So um, we'll see. But I will be reading this year. Um, Now is the time to read that. And then another book. This is going to actually be a reread for me. This is David Lindsay's A Voyage to Arcturus. This is in a beautiful UK Penguin science fiction classic version. It's called Penguin Classics Science Fiction. The little decal there. And it's just this paper, matted paper with the image here kind of cut out so you can feel it. And it's got the UK papery feel to it. It's a very nice edition. One that I deliberately purchased because I read this initially as an ebook a few years ago, and I was just kind of reading it as a trifle. C.S. Lewis had mentioned it in his essay called On Stories as a book that he really liked, and used it as an example for part of his argument. And I thought his discussion of the novel was very interesting, and so I figured I'd pick it up. Turns out it's like a cult science fiction classic, and I can see why, because man, this book is such a trip of a novel. It's on the surface, none of it makes any sense because it's about um, a character being transported to the planet of Arcturus, and he goes from Earth to Arcturus, but nothing like no logic, nothing seems to make sense on that world. Because he like wakes up with a third arm or something like that, and the arm slowly withers away, and he encounters all these different characters, and they don't seem to make any sense in what they're saying or how they interact with him and whatever, and yet that's on the surface. Even when I first read this, I knew that I had the feeling that there was a lot going on underneath that I could just barely glimpse at, and that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And this book actually shot up to one of my favorite books of all time just after that one read. And I hold it there tentatively still, because I still have fond memories of reading this, but I want to reread this and see how it holds up. And so this is a must read for me this year too. Actually, see, we got the C.S. Lewis quote here, and then we also got Philip Pullman, which I believe is kind of ironic having C.S. Lewis and Philip Pullman on the same cover there with blurbs. Uh, if you know Philip Pullman's history when it comes to his trilogy, His Dark Materials, as a response to C.S. Lewis's Narnia trilogy, or not Narnia series, sorry. But yeah, those are the novels I want to read. Now I have to get into the nonfiction. Um, so I have two guaranteed reads that are not part of my Western Canon reading list. We have The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion by Jonathan Haidt. Uh, this is a book that has been on my TBR again for so long. Originally, I had it as an ebook, and then recently I found this hardcover, really nice hardcover, and I'm going to be reading it this year. There's no excuses not to. I know I'm going to find the whole subject fascinating. I know it's going to be a book that is going to be just a very insightful, very much an argument starting kind of book that I really love to read. And so I have this as an ebook too, but uh, I don't know which format I'm going to read it in, but I'm going to be reading it nonetheless. And then the other nonfiction book is Seven Pillars of Wisdom by Lawrence of Arabia. This is his basically autobiographical reflection on during the World War One conflict in the Middle East. So during World War One, there was conflict in the Middle East that was kind of a part, like a small part of the world for First World War, and he kind of chronicles his part in that in this massive epic. And um, I don't know a whole lot about that history, so I'm probably gonna have to read, say, a few Wikipedia entries, maybe on the author and then on the conflict itself. But uh, before I read this, but this is a book that I have read the very opening a few times before. Like uh, I recommend that you do the same. I think I've even read it out myself. Just go to chapter one because there's a lot of weird introductory chapters and whatever that don't really make sense to me. Going to just chapter one, dare you to read that page and not be utterly captivated, because it's very well written, and I hope the rest of the book is written that way too. And then we get to another piece of general nonfiction. This book is not a guarantee, but it is very high up there. And it's a book I recently purchased, but I've had the ebook for a while. This is Why Liberalism Works by Deidre McCloskey, Deidre Nansen McCloskey. How true liberal values produce a freer, more equal, and prosperous world for all. And it's an oversized book, so it is bigger than what its size or what its thickness looks like. But it's a collection of books on why liberalism is the political system or political way to go, or why liberalism, uh, how it works, what it is, why it matters, and a lot of the chapter headings and a lot of the uh, pieces included in here all are on subjects that definitely fascinate me, and I want to learn what liberalism is and why it must be defended, or at least why its proponents are very much um, very proselytic in their push for liberal values, because there has been a lot of pushback on liberal values recently, and some of them have some of them have appealed to me. For example, like the erosion of community and the erosion of civic value or civic duties and whatnot that seem to leave or that seem to be thrown by the wayside. And when it comes to discussion of like the autonomous individual and the the or the fetishization of the autonomous individual. But then again, you can't when you think of freedom, like is an extremely freedom and equality are extremely important values too, and those freedom and equality seem to be challenged when you have community values too. So you always have these tensions between these different worldviews, and that fascinates me, and I wanted to explore that more. But then, lastly, I'm going to just briefly go over some books from my Western Canon reading list that I hope to get to this year. The first one, I guess, will be after I'm done the playwrights. So I have Euripides, and then I have Aristophanes to go through. The next book, or next person on my list for my Western Canon reading list, um, is uh, Xenophon, the ancient historian. I have his uh, Hellenis, I think is what it's called, and uh, if I read that, it's a fairly short work. It's his continuation of Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War. If you're not familiar, Thucydides never finished it, or um, for some reason it just ends like mid-sentence, 10 years before the war actually ended, and Xenophon picks up basically exactly where Thucydides left off, and he's not considered as reliable or as um, trustworthy as Thucydides is, or as rigorous with his history. but nonetheless, he's an invaluable author that survives from ancient Greece, and he's also got many other works that I am interested in reading, like his account um, of being a part of the Sparta, um, a group of 10,000 soldiers that were lent to one of the Persian princes in order to fight for the Persian crown. And so there's that story of that how that ended up and how that failed, and his account of the Greek survivors trying to go back home, uh, all the way from the Middle East. So um, I'm going to be reading some of Xenophon's work. How much, I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see. I will be at least giving him a try. And then we move on to Demosthenes. This is his selected speeches, translated by Robin Waterfield, with notes by Chris Carey. A nice little healthy uh, Oxford World Classic. He was a famous Greek orator during the 4th century of Athens, basically Athens' last great century, um, um, before Rome would end up overwhelming and taking over. But Demosthenes is considered the best orator of the ancient world, and then Cicero was considered usually the second best. But uh, I don't know anything about that. I'll be totally dependent on the scholars and translators that uh, put the material in this book. So then moving on, then I'll be moving on to works on Alexander the Great, which starts with the Campaigns of Alexander by this is by Arrian, like the ancient author Arrian, but this is the landmark Arrian edition from the landmark series. The series editor is Robert Strassler. I do have the Herodotus and the Thucydides one, and then I also have the Julius Caesar Volume 2, but this is the one I want to read uh, now because this is our main source work on Alexander the Great that survives. Um, Even though this was well written, like well into the, I think, 1st or 2nd century AD, so hundreds of years after. But he was consulting historical material, surviving manuscripts that account for the history of Alexander that we do not have today. And so he's the best that we have. And this landmark edition is the best edition to go for because of all the notes and illustrations. Look at that. This is the actual text.